Good evening. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, and resources. I'm Stu Reed, and here's my co-host, Dave Bernstein. Hey, Dave.
Hey, what's in the news this week?
We talked about it briefly last week, but I wanted to get into a little more detail. Now, apparently, San Francisco has just approved self-driving cars for a taxi service. Pretty amazing. What's going on with that, Dave?
It's not really approved. It started happening yesterday, and
Uh-huh.
three New York Times reporters took taxi rides through San Francisco.
Wow.
It is, and they'll anybody who wants them now can an app just like Uber or Lyft.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, at the
Well,
moment,
the first thing that comes to mind, Dave, is wow, is this safe? It sounds like sci-fi. We've talked on earlier shows about all the sophisticated sensing, motion sensing, visual sensing, audio sensing that's needed to navigate these things. I mean, is it safe? What's the early feedback?
absolutely guaranteed somebody is going to get killed by automated cars. Tesla's self-driving mode has already killed a few.
Mm-hmm.
They will argue, but it's safer than people driving themselves. And that may or not be true. Somebody actually looked at the Tesla figures and they didn't particularly add up. I suspect that is true or soon would be true. This is what you can do with AI today and $100,000 worth of sensors and computers in each car.
Wow. Just want to mention before you get into further detail that the company is called Waymo. It's an autonomous vehicle company owned by Google, parent company Alphabet, and General Motors. Um,
No, General Motors is a competitor that has Cruise,
hmm
which was also on and had two accidents last week. The
Really?
dramatic, yeah. In one, somebody was slightly hurt, apparently. In the other, a fire truck was racing through a red light,
hmm
and Cruise's AI didn't pick that up, and they hit the fire truck.
Oh my goodness.
No injuries. Uh, it's really, really hard. Just think about it. Somebody opening a door, is that a bicycle uh, coming ahead or just a small tree that I'm picking up?
hmm
And the biggest problem with self-driving software is people and situations are unpredictable.
Right.
They Google by now has probably, yes, has definitely driven more than 1 million miles with drivers in these cars running under AI. The big trials were in Phoenix, but that doesn't mean nearly as much as San Francisco.
hmm
Phoenix, until recently, they did it only in the suburbs where there wasn't much traffic. It's a new city, so mostly the streets are wide and well paved, and it very rarely rains.
hmm
San Francisco is hilly, old narrow streets, loads of pedestrians, hard to predict. And that's why, from my point of view, I think this is this dark moment that proved it's going to work. I
Wow.
don't know whether it's going to come to New York in 2 years or in 6 years.
hmm
That's now the time frame we're thinking of.
hmm
The Chinese are also actually out there with production. The cars are a modified Jaguar that one news report said cost over $200,000.
Wow.
Jags are not cheap. I think Jaguar is owned by one of the Chinese, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, Jags are not cheap, but to get to $200,000, that's where I got my number of $100,000 worth of sensors and computers.
hmm
On top of it, if you saw the picture, there's a box there bigger than the radius like the taxi cabs have, which includes sensors, including LiDAR. like radar, but using light waves.
Mm-hmm.
That alone probably costs $10,000. And it
Mm-hmm.
cost $50,000 4 or 5 years ago when Waymo first got started,
Mm-hmm.
because it was very much a specialty item that was used by the military.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming down with mass production.
Mm-hmm.
One of the Chinese think they can get it down to $300, and Elon Musk thinks he's going to be safe without needing it. Most of the work is done with visual, and that's why it's so different when you drive it at night.
Yeah, yeah. Dave, I just wanted I do a lot of driving. I've been driving for probably 50 plus years. And I consider myself a pretty good driver. I've taught members of my family to drive. And one of the things I remember teaching my folks is anticipate the unexpected from other drivers. And I'm wondering whether or not the software can do this. I just have an example. Just last week, I was driving on a parkway, and two lanes on the right were exiting, and then two lanes on the left continued in another direction. And I know from experience that the two lanes on the right get backed up, and occasionally you have somebody jump out from that backup into the lane where the traffic is moving, and you got to be prepared to stop. So I'm always looking for that. What happened to me the other day, and I hadn't had this happen before, and I've driven this road many years, is that rather than have somebody jump out, somebody at the last minute tried to ease their way in to the two lanes that were bumper to bumper, but they wouldn't let him all the way in. So here he is stuck out in my lane where the traffic is moving at 50 miles an hour and he can't get in. I've got to like come to a complete stop as it turns out. And I got to make sure the guy behind me doesn't slam into me because he's going 50 miles an hour as well. So, it's that kind of nuanced anticipation and reaction that I'm wondering how the software is going to do that.
That's why it took tens of billions of dollars and millions of miles of driving with cameras, providing road information.
Mm-hmm.
And it still is not perfect, but it's good enough that the state of California decided it was going to be okay. Not all San Francisco. It's very little of downtown is available if you hail the cab because there's more traffic.
Okay, so
And
Dave,
it's
did they the permission that was granted, was it for just a specific geographic area of Frisco, or that's just where the vehicles are deployed?
I know that's where the vehicles are deployed. It may have been by regulation,
Mm-hmm.
or it may have been just Google being sensible there.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I tell you, they know a lot better than I do. In fact, your primary source is the Google people who've been very open about it, talked about the problems. But like, say, Uber, which 6 years ago or so said they'd have self-driving taxis across the country 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't seen any. In fact, they
Right.
gave up a project. And Uber was saying, this is going to put all our drivers out of work, which is something we need to talk about. And we're going to save so much money, Uber's going to be worth a fortune. And the stock market believed them. But when Google and Baidu in China and GM's Cruise and Intel's Israeli operation actually got out to the field, they found it was much harder than they expected to get all the information. And the computer that has to run it, which is presumably in the trunk, is a very high powered PC.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know quite what it is, but it's probably $50,000 worth of PC just to run it.
Mm-hmm. And that's a
Uh,
lot of PC these days, given the how the price have come down for processing power.
these days, you can get a darn good PC for $900,
Yeah.
perfectly functional one for 500.
Mm-hmm.
So that's required to run the AI that's there. And it turns out it's impractical to do it from the cloud. The phone companies thought they'd make a bonanza using 5G and that all these cars would be connected to them and have servers in the phone company spots. Too slow.
Hmm.
Don't have them everywhere. What happens if you go out of range on the highway? Does the car suddenly stop?
Right. So
Uh,
what are they doing? What are they? There's got to be some kind of connectivity to let them know what's going on with traffic, right?
ordinary wireless connectivity, knowing what's going on in traffic.
When you say ordinary wireless, what is it? Cell phone wireless?
Yeah, cell phone wireless,
Mm-hmm.
4G or 5G. No
Mm-hmm.
problem doing it in 4G.
Mm-hmm.
Don't need 5G. Uh, and I actually researched this 5 years ago because I was doing work on what was going to happen in telco wireless. And all the smart people were saying, and all the hype was saying, it's going to happen 2, 3 years. We've got it. And all the smart people were saying, forget about
Mm-hmm.
it. And it's now starting to happen. And as I say, I don't know when it's going to be in New York or all over San Francisco, or more likely, all over Chinese city like Hangzhou, uh, which is going to happen before they go into
Mm-hmm.
Beijing. Hangzhou is only about the size of New York City. There's about at least 2 dozen cities in China that have more people than New York.
Mm-hmm.
And they're now producing more cars than the U.S., although not on a per capita basis.
Well,
Yeah, China.
talk about unpredictability. New York City driving is a case unto itself. I imagine there are probably some other very dense cities like Tokyo, maybe some cities in India that have the density and maybe even the same craziness. I know I spent time in Jamaica that's going back a couple of decades now. They didn't have the density, but the level of mayhem of the drivers behind the wheel was unreal. So you got so many variables there. It's going to be interesting to see how the software evolves and if this stuff really works.
Places like Greece and Nigeria have much higher accident rates.
Mm-hmm.
States. Those two I just happen to know
Mm-hmm.
of. Well, have you used Waze or Apple in your car?
No, I for the most part I've been stuck. I don't know why, just historically using the Google app,
Well,
which
Google owns Waze, so
okay, yeah,
it's
yeah.
a different.
I use it for primarily for traffic. New York City traffic is so crazy. From my location when I go out, there are usually about 3 or 4 routes that I can kind of take to get to where I'm going. And the real question is, okay, where's the traffic? And I find it very helpful in that regard.
It works remarkably well. I didn't
Yeah.
believe it when Jenny was telling me that it was working. But yesterday, we went to Jones Beach,
Hmm.
back to New York. We asked Waze. There were Northern State Parkway, Southern State Parkway,
Hmm.
Belt Parkway,
Right.
and we were trying to. I said I was trying to figure out which was going to be best, and she said, "Waze is going to know. Put us on the Northern State
Hmm.
with instructions to get off at the far side of Queens, take the Frogs Neck Bridge through the Bronx, and then down down I guess
Bruckner.
down the FDR,
Okay. Hmm.
which is usually a little bit shorter and faster. My mother used to live out there. So that was smart. But about 3 miles before we got to the Thargsneck turn, it came over Waze saying, route changed,
Uh-oh.
tra- traffic ahead, and switched us to the Grand Central Parkway. And we were at the Triborough Bridge in, I don't know, 15 minutes.
Well, she got notified in time to make the change.
Yeah. Now, how are they doing that?
Good
Well,
question, Dave. I mean, is it satellites? Is it cell towers? That's something I've been kicking around with some of my tech buddies, and I haven't gotten any satisfactory answer. Maybe you can shed some light on that.
Well, it's satellites in that it's mostly going over GPS data,
Mm-hmm.
just like how your phone knows where you are. It also uses some Wi-Fi and local phones. You can locate most things using Wi-Fi in any dense area. But the main thing it has is that millions of cars on the road are using it. And they're all sending back over, normally over cellular data,
Mm-hmm.
where they're going, how fast they're moving, and sometimes notifications
Mm.
that drive
Well,
turn.
that's a question I have. Do you, uh, is a cell phone sending data back if you're not using the GPS navigation system? Do you know? Maybe, I mean, I don't know that anyone knows that, but maybe you can shed some
If I
light.
turn off my location on Google,
Mm-hmm.
or if I'm somewhere where there's no way they could reach me by GPS, say in a tunnel,
Mm-hmm.
they usually have good, accurate information because they can use the Wi-Fi in the next 16 cars, which connect to the Wi-Fi in the 16 cars just outside where they have the information.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't believe until we used this driving how accurate it is.
Mm-hmm.
We really are telling you in 800 feet, take a left turn, and then 400 feet, go to the left lane in order to take a left turn. And then at 50 feet, you are 50 feet away from your turn.
Mm-hmm.
And that is how accurate the GPS is. And all that information is constantly being fed back to what's got to be billions of dollars worth of computers at Google. It might be in Israel where Waze is located. Google bought it a while back, or they might more likely be distributed in Google data centers around the world. And from that, they can see how fast traffic is moving where,
Mm-hmm.
exactly where you are.
Yeah. I'm out on the road, 4 or 5 days a week. New York traffic, driving through the boroughs, Manhattan, Westchester, Brooklyn, Queens. And the other thing, other than, what's the best route, it also shows you, and I'm not saying anything that folks probably don't know, but the level of traffic density, slow down, no slow down, how long the slowdown is graphically, you can see on the map. Looks like it's just, from this quarter mile or this half mile. And it also gives you the timing. Oh, 5 minutes slowdown, 3 minutes slowdown. And then it also shows you an alternative route simultaneously. It's astounding. I resisted for a long time using it, Dave, because I'm an old map guy, for paper maps. And I grew up with those and I was really proud of being able to read maps and that all that kind of stuff from the analog world. So I kind of resisted a long time. But once I really embraced it and saw the power of it, it's amazing. And utility, especially in a market like where we live, the New York metro market, where there's always traffic. And it doesn't matter how well you know the roads. It's what's happening on the roads at any given point in time that you need to know. And it's astoundingly useful.
Now, you had a story from another giant in the field, not Google, Facebook. What's up?
Yeah. Well, we've been experiencing these wildfires up in Canada and out in California. And we even had some really environmental issues here in our New York metro region a couple of weeks back with the smoke coming from Canada, wildfires. Well, there was just a story. The Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, just accused Facebook of putting profits ahead of safety after it blocked news amid devastating wildfires in the country. And what happened is Facebook banned news on its platform in response to a Canadian law that's forcing it to share profits with news outlets. We've talked about this before. I think this is something that is happening in Australia and maybe a couple other markets that you can fill us in on. But the real issue here is that serious public health, public safety catastrophe going on in Canada. And according to some data, 77% of Canadians use Facebook as one of its primary news sources. And Facebook/Meta is now blocking news, particularly about the wildfire, on its platform, with devastating effects for Canadians, according to the Prime Minister. He said this is essential information that should be out there for folks. And
Many people died in Maui lately in a fire.
I haven't kept up with the latest count. What is it?
The latest count was over 100, with 800 apparently missing.
Whoa.
Yeah. Now, I don't know whether that was on the news, that there was a fire nearby that should have evacuated the city,
Mm-hmm.
evacuated big areas of Canada and California. But it probably was. And cutting off communication.
Yeah, that
That
doesn't work. That doesn't work. Yeah, Dave,
now
we have done a lot of work, and myself, my some of my colleagues and associates have done a lot of work in public safety communications. And back after Hurricane Sandy, we established something we call the WHCR Emergency Broadcast Team, associated with the radio station at City College on which we're broadcasting. We call it WEBT. And one of the things that we learned over the years in studying and using communications is you got to have multiple redundant backup ways for folks to get information, because in an emergency, you don't know what's going to be working and what's not going to be working. And very often it's the social media information that gets through when other forms of communication are blocked or not working. And for something as ubiquitous and as used by so many people, Facebook, for them to block that, that's really something that has to be worked out, because that's such a public safety hazard for folks to not to be able to communicate and use that platform. Even if they Facebook, has a problem with the Canadian law, my thinking that they should waive that issue in crisis and open up the platform.
Facebook is losing money by cutting off the news in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know exactly how much they make from it, and exactly how much they'd have to pay, but they clearly it was a highly profitable product. They're biting off the nose to spite their face locally,
Mm-hmm.
in order to scare the entire world to go in with what Facebook demands. In Australia, before they passed a law that demanded some payback to news stories that Facebook sends on copies, they said, you can't put that. We'll be inspired to leave for Australia. They didn't. On the EU privacy directory a few years ago, they talked about going out of the entire European Union. And on that one, people even laughed, because that would have been such a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Korea is getting some money from the US tech giants, and half the world, it seems, France, India, are working on legislation to do the same.
So the issue here, Dave, just to clarify for our listeners and viewers, is that Facebook and other social media platforms are posting news from other sources and not compensating those other sources. And
Right.
that's what various local, national governments are now insisting, that there be some way to compensate the news sources for that. Is that accurate description?
Most of my friends, including all the people I know in ISOC, think it's a bad idea because it's interfering with companies do on the internet, and they want no government to have power over companies on the internet. That may or may not be right. I had an argument on this with Ellie Noam, who's a good friend, a Columbia professor, when he was visited by the head of the Communications Authority of Canada, and that we had a nice meeting. That may be right. Ellie may be right. It may be a bad thing to restrict what Google and Facebook do in Canada. But they should have the right to make that decision. And what's happening now is Facebook is trying to prove it's more powerful than governments, that the people in Canada will rebel against their government and vote against Trudeau if they were cut off from Facebook. They threatened to just leave the country. That's what they threatened in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And if what would happen if suddenly the 70% of Americans or Canadians who use Facebook reasonably often were cut off? Would they get angry?
I would think so. I would think so.
And if you had an election coming, would you dare anger them? And that's why an awful lot of national laws that have been dealing with this, like American privacy law, haven't gone there because Google and Facebook are so big, have so much power, significant market power, very significant, that they can threaten that the government does what the people of that country think is the right thing. They will just cut it off.
Wow.
Happens. Now, I think it is ridiculous that, at least in the early days of the COVID epidemic, before we knew what was going on, for Google not to have a warning on its homepage of everybody in America, maybe not every time you log on, but maybe once a day, and when it was clear the shots were working, not the demand you get the shots, but information that tells you where you could get the shots if you wanted, and links to good, solid medical information about it. Would fewer people have died if that was on every Google homepage?
I would think so, Dave. I mean, it's a real shame that these platforms do not have any of the community service sensibilities that we used to see in print media, that we used to see in electronic radio and TV media, that was even required to some degree by the FCC, that, some of the community service and community information be put out there by these platforms. And today, the social media platforms, not only is it not required, but they don't even have any sense of any real mandate for that or need for that on their part.
And we are now required by the FCC to give a station identification.
Yes,
we are. Then we're going to take a music break.
Okay, thank you for that, Dave. What a segue. This is WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. You're listening to Dave Burstein and Stu Reed on Community and Technology. We will be right back after a brief musical break. Stay tuned.
There's a saying old, says that love is blind. Still I'm often told, seeking ye shall find. So I'm going to seek a certain lad I've had in mind. Looking everywhere, I haven't found him yet. He's the big affair I cannot forget. Only man I ever think of with regret. I'd like to add his initial to my monogram. Tell me for this lost lamb. There's a somebody I'm longing to see. I hope that he turns out to be someone who'll watch over me. I'm a little lamb who's lost in the wood. I know I could always be good to one who'll watch over me. Although he may not be the man some girls think of as handsome, to my heart he carries the key. Won't you tell him please to put on some speed, follow my lead, oh how I need someone to watch
Okay, we're back. Community Technology with Dave Burstein and Stu Reed on WHCR 90.3 FM. Dave, I think we were going to talk a little bit about updates on AI the second half of the show. What's the latest?
Well, I wish it wasn't worth half a show. I wish there wasn't so much going on, some of it important, that I can't keep up with it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm spending many hours every week trying to. I'm learning it. I'm getting there. But it is expanding at a pace that has never happened before in history, whether it be the growth of the internet. I was in the middle of the internet boom, whether it was when Newton was inventing calculus, and Newton and Leibniz were inventing the calculus, or the Industrial Revolution, or the 1940s, when major progress was made on things like radar and the atomic bomb.
Mm-hmm.
There is hundreds of billions of dollars being invested, hundreds of thousands of researchers, and hundreds of thousands of people in business who are sure they will be the next Bill Gates and make $1 billion. And so there's enough news that we can spend a big part of the show on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And yeah, for me, Dave, the real news is not so much although it's true, the scientific frenzy and the economic frenzy that's going on, but the potential impact that this stuff is going to have on our lives. That's the real amazing part for me.
So let's start with what we've just been talking about. Self-driving cars, now going live, self-driving taxis. You can go into an app and Google Waymo will send you a taxi to take you to many parts of San Francisco. That's real. That was the first half of the show. Now, what's that going to do with all the taxi drivers?
Out of work.
That was the dream at Uber, and they sold it to the stock market that they would make a heck of a lot of money because they wouldn't have to pay drivers. And what's going to happen to those people, and why should we care?
Well, clearly, I mean, if you got a large segment of the economy that's unemployed, has no revenue coming, and that's going to be a drag on everybody. And we got to look out for each other because we are our brother's keeper, and that's more than just a philosophical understanding. If we don't take care of each other, we're going to go down together. So that's just my own feeling about why we should care.
You sound like Confucius, not a capitalist. Ah, it's guaranteed. It's, yeah, I'll say it's guaranteed, even though I'm projecting into the future, that a heck of a lot of people are going to lose their job because AI can do it cheaper.
Hmm.
That's why there's a writer's strike in Hollywood now. Did I tell the story about Jenny and AI? I think I've told this on the air before, but it's a good one.
Okay, go.
Jenny's been commissioned to do a sizzle reel for a TV show that's being promoted and hopefully produced. She was having trouble coming up with a script. I went to GPT, said, create a script for a sizzle reel, 2 to 3 minutes on this topic, and describe a little bit about what was required. Prompting is a whole skill. I don't have it yet. And it came back with a script that was so close to what it should be that the next day, Jenny took it virtually unchanged to her client. And they said, this is wonderful. It is that good. Stu, I see your mouth going.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm listening. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. If you
So
want to
so
go
the
back for a
script
while,
came
I'll
back.
back one.
The script came back good.
What came back good?
The script that Jenny had
Came
generated
back
through
so good
ChatGPT.
that the client loved it. Now, things like that are happening right and left. And that's why one of the actors on the picket line, were also afraid of the virtual actors replacing them. I was holding a sign on the picket line saying, AI destroys lives.
This was what?
Lives.
Oh, live. Okay. Hmm.
Yeah. One of the big issues in the actors' strike is the Hollywood studios want to pay an actor to come in for a day, 2 days, pay them a fair amount of money if need be, and then use that person's face, image, gestures from then on to make all the crowd and everything, all the walking and all the restaurant patrons that they hire extras for. That's a heck of a lot of jobs.
Yeah, and not just today's movies, but tomorrow's and next year and the next century's movies, perhaps. I mean, that kind of thing lives forever.
Yep. Now, video in AI right now is hard. The best example of a video AI that I know was they need a whole pile of humans to work on it. In Brazil, a great singer of the 70s who died long ago duetted with her daughter in a live commercial, 2 minutes long, for Volkswagen, talking about the independence of Brazil. It was a very popular song originally because that was during the US-backed junta that was running Brazil and was brutal. And they got together with the family. The daughter, who's also a singer, duetted, and it looks great. But in 2022, 2023, ChatGPT can't do that. There are loads of video applications, dozens, that are working towards that. And the best will maybe okay for 15 seconds. That's going to get better, I'm sure. We know that's how it goes. But one of the things is that AI can do now is voices. The Wall Street Journal reporter, Joanna Stern, trained an AI on her voice, and you can go to commercial services that will do this for you. And it was so good, it fooled her mother on the telephone. You can now, for surprisingly little, like $30 a month, have your choice of 120 realistic voices in almost as many languages, which includes the simultaneous translation. So the article that presented stuff was titled, "Dubbing is Dead." And that's, I'm sure, already starting to happen. But the one that is actually out there in substantial production that shows where it's all going to go, you can do voices. Can you do the voice actor for an audiobook? A Washington Post reporter did a superb reporting on this, checking it out, finding out what was happening. It not merely can be done, it is being done. It costs $10,000, $20,000, sometimes a little bit more, for professional reading of a book. For $500, you can have a computer voice read that book.
Whoa. Whoa. If you're a producer, that's a no-brainer which way you're going on that.
And in fact, several of the major book publishers, of which there are very few, we're down to only about 5 big book publishers, and they want to go back.
Well, consolidation in so many industries globally.
Yep. But that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
Let's stick to what the computers are doing here and the AI. Are already in production with audiobooks that sound decent. What does decent mean? The Washington Post reporter said, well, for the first 5 minutes, it wasn't that bad. But after that, it became really hard to listen to because it was so monotonous and so much the same.
Well, the voice quality was monotonous.
And they didn't have the inflections.
Yeah.
The pauses, the logical pauses in the text, and so on. But it was good enough that they're doing it. And she said they have hired a number of prominent voice actors who are keeping their identity hidden, but people in the industry are speculating, and offered them, for the use of their voice, go into the studio for 5 days and record a whole lot of things. 4 times what a voice actor like that was likely to make. That has got to be tempting to a lot of people. And that's almost nothing when it's spread over how much it's going to be used.
Yeah, in perpetuity.
Yeah, and you don't need too many of those voices to read the books. Get a couple of dozen, and the major publisher very rarely.
How long did CNN use James Earl Jones's name on as their tagline? I mean, yes, you're right, Dave. You get a few of those in the can, and you could like just rock and roll if you're a network or a producer. Wow. So no wonder the creatives in Hollywood are on strike. I mean, I have not been following that strike, but is there a proposed resolution? Do you see an end to that? Where's that going to go? It sounds to me like the talent is on the short end of the stick.
It usually is, unless the talent all stays together. That's what unions are about. And of all unlikely places, the unions in Hollywood are quite strong. All the late night shows, all the live shows, all the discussion shows are now off the air.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know
that. John Oliver, comedian, HBO, is doing stand-up to occupy his time since the show is off the air. The writer's strike is being honored by almost everybody, which means anybody wanting to make a movie isn't. the writers are not writing them, period.
Mm-hmm.
It's remarkable solidarity, and if you saw that in many other places, uh, it would be a different country.
You are. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're demanding or they're asking for some limits, including for how long and how often you can use an actor's image.
Mm-hmm.
And the studios at the moment are saying, "Nah." Bob Iger at Disney saying, "This is crazy. They're asking impossible things." Well, I hate to tell you, yes, Disney had a bad year. There's a couple of movies flopped, and they raised the prices in Disney World, and fewer people are going. But a bad year still means they made many billions of dollars
Yeah.
or to pay the actors.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what now. I was amazed. Tell me about minimum basic income, Stu. You've been working on that.
Yeah, well, universal basic income is one of the terms it's called. Unconditional basic income is another term for it. And basically it's the notion that there should be some undergirdment for everyone, a basic income that everyone receives, regardless of their station, regardless of their condition, without any pre-requirements or preconditions. And essentially, it gives a baseline to everyone to help just sustain them. And there are a bunch of trials all over the world. In some major cities in the US, it's been trialed. And for the most part, it's been a resounding success. You know, the naysayers want you to believe that if you give people money, that they're going to become lazy, they're going to use the money for alcohol or drug addiction. Well,
You mean the
that has
U.S.
not been the
Senator from
case.
West Virginia?
I'm sorry, what?
You mean like the U.S. Senator from West Virginia, Democrat Joe Manchin, who said we shouldn't do that. They're going to spend it all on alcohol and
Yeah.
drugs, quote unquote.
I mean, they are just so this is the privileged class, the money class, talking about what poor people are going to do if they have a couple of dollars in their pocket. You know, they really do not have a clue, and they don't really want to change things because they are benefiting from the inequity. This is my own take on that. But universal basic income or unconditional basic income (UBI) kind of turns that notion on its head. And in the trials where they have run it, what happens is folks get freed up to do more creative things. Folks get freed up to pursue professional ambitions that they maybe didn't have time to pursue before. So folks become more creative, more productive when there's a ground floor of basic income that helps them meet their daily needs. So they're not nose to the wheel just to pay the rent, just to eat, just to put food on the table for their kids. So it's something that I very much support, and everywhere I've seen it, it works. Um,
Isn't it ridiculously expensive and impractical?
no, I don't think so. I mean, to me, it's more expensive and impractical to have all the folks out of work that we have, to have the huge unemployment that we have, to have all of the support services that we need out there to help people survive when they don't have an income. So I would say no. You know, I'm not an economist, so I can't really look at the macro picture and say that with any
Let
real
me pick
authority,
that
but
up.
that's what I believe.
Let me pick that up because economists have looked at it. And it turns out that we are spending so much money on the existing relief programs and the overhead of the social workers do it.
Mm-hmm.
The private detectives to look at possible fraud and the offices that have to be rented for all those people and
Mm-hmm.
what we're spending, and it wouldn't quite be enough to give everybody in the country a reasonable place to live and enough to eat and medical care when they need it. but it comes surprisingly close.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why did I bring that into this show? Well, we've just been talking about how AI is definitely going to clobber a whole lot of jobs. So anybody with humanity in them wants to find a way to make sure that people won't be destroyed by that. Sam Altman, who's the head of OpenAI, ChatGPT, has said that he and most of the people he knows in Silicon Valley believe there should be a universal basic income. That amazed me because it hadn't been getting any political support. But when they look at it and know how many people's jobs are going to be affected, radiologists are already getting worried. My MRI at Mount Sinai Hospital was read just fine by an AI.
Mm-hmm.
Although the way Sinai did it is they had a radiologist read it and the computer. And the way they presented the report is there was a report from the doctor, and the report from the computer was, I agree. And
Yeah.
there's been lots of tests that at this point, for most kinds of x-rays, it's very close to what a radiologist would do,
Yeah.
or pap smears.
And I think what we're seeing now, Dave, is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what AI and whom AI is going to displace in the workforce. And I'm not so sure that, it will create new jobs. We used to say, well, the computer is going to replace people, but we need people to run the computers. We need people to program the computers. I don't know that we're going to need a workforce to make this AI stuff that's anywhere commensurate with the number of folks that are going to be put out of work by the AI stuff.
But there's enough jobs in society that needs doing.
That's true.
How many kids would do better in school if they had an occasional tutor?
Yeah, all of them, virtually. Mm-hmm.
And the jobs are there, and it turns out that economists have shown that you can, by things like government spending, monetary policy, industrial organization, pull up unemployment, pull up the employment rate. It's hard, it's expensive, you have to be very careful not to put into wild inflation. But in fact, most of the number of jobs after AI, a lot of the AI people say, a quarter of the country is going to be out of work. That's why we need to do something. Actually, an economist can tell you, well, just as we could have in the Depression got most people back to work pretty quickly, and we did after the 2008 market crash, and we did after the pandemic hit, we now have some of the lowest unemployment rates in American history after the pandemic put a lot of people out of work. Mm-hmm. China is failing at that. They have a big unemployment problem. But you can mitigate a lot of it. But if you don't happen to be the one who lands in a decent new position, especially people over 40 or 50 who have a hard time getting a new job, it will ruin many, many lives.
Yeah. And you're right, UBI, I don't know that solves that problem, but it certainly helps to mitigate in a big way by giving a ground floor and some basic support for baseline needs. Right. Okay, thanks, Dave. This has been Dave Bernstein and Stu Reed on Community and Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Tune in. Just might learn something. Thanks. Good night.